Chapter 8 of Gilgamesh. This is on page 53 of your textbook. Utanapishtim challenges Gilgamesh to go without sleep for a week. When Gilgamesh fails the test, Utanapishtim gives him a magic plant and sends him on his way home. Gilgamesh loses the plant before he arrives in Uruk, but he returns home safely. Utanapishtim, the faraway, said to Gilgamesh, "If you wish to become like the heavenly gods and live for days without end, you must first possess the strength of a god. Even though you are mighty, I will show you that, like all human beings, you are weak. Starting with this night, I want you to remain upon your feet and stay awake for 7 days and 7 nights and 6 days." Gilgamesh obediently squatted down and tried to stay awake. Despite his best intentions, sleep blew upon him like a soft mist and conquered him. Utanapishtim said to his wife, "Look at this hero who wants everlasting life. Sleep fans him like a soft mist." Utanapishtim's wife advised her husband, "Touch Gilgamesh so that he will awaken and return safely to his strong-walled city. See to it that he will be able to return to his land the way he came, entering through the gate by which he left." The faraway responded, "In time I will do as you advise. Meanwhile, Gilgamesh will try to deceive you by telling you he has not slept at all. We must devise proof of his slumber to show him how weak he really is. Each day I want you to bake him a loaf of bread and place it by his head, and record how long he sleeps by placing a mark upon the wall behind him each day." So each day that Gilgamesh slept, Utanapishtim's wife put a loaf of bread by his head and made a mark for that day upon the wall behind him. By the morning of the 7th day, Gilgamesh was still asleep. 6 loaves of bread were lined up in a row by his head, and there were 6 marks on the wall. The first loaf had dried out, the second had spoiled, the third had become soggy, the crust of the fourth had turned white, the fifth had a moldy cast, the 6th was still fresh in color, and the 7th was warm, having just been removed from the oven. Utanapishtim touched Gilgamesh as his wife placed the 7th loaf of bread next to the others. Gilgamesh awoke and said, "I had hardly fallen asleep when you touched me and awakened me." Utanapishtim replied, "Gilgamesh, count the loaves of bread by your head so that you will realize how many days you have slept. Your first loaf is dried out, the second has spoiled, the third is soggy, the crust of the fourth has turned white, the fifth has a moldy cast, the 6th is still fresh in color, and I awakened you just as my wife put the 7th loaf, still warm from the oven, by your head." Gilgamesh groaned in resignation and said, "What should I do now? Where will I go? Now that the robber Death is holding my limbs, I know that Death hides in my bedroom and I will never escape it. Wherever I place my feet, Death will be there with me. I will never become like the heavenly gods and live for days without end." Utanapishtim replied, "Let your heart not despair, Gilgamesh. It is true the heavenly gods have decreed that you, like all other human beings, cannot live for days without end. They have not granted you life everlasting, but Anu, Enlil, and Ea have granted you other gifts. The power to be unsurpassed in might they have granted you. The power to be skilled in wrestling they have granted you. The power to be skilled with the sword, the dagger, the bow, and the axe they have granted you. The power to be like a devastating flood in battle they have granted you. The power to lead attacks from which no one can escape they have granted you. The power to be unrivaled in heroism they have granted you. The power to seize and slaughter the bull of heaven they have granted you. The power to enter the cedar forest in the land of the living, to overthrow and kill Humbaba, and to fell the cedars they have granted you. The power to make the long, difficult, and dangerous journey to meet with me they have granted you. And as if extraordinary might and heroism were not sufficient gifts, the power to be supreme among human beings they have granted you. The power to rule your people as king and to be the greatest of leaders they have granted you. The power to bring light or darkness upon your people they have granted you. The power to free people or enslave them they have granted you. The power to teach your people and lead them to wisdom they have granted you. Therefore, Utanapishtim counseled, cast away fear and sorrow. Rejoice in your heart that the heavenly gods love you and have smiled upon you. Utanapishtim then turned to his boatman and said, Urshanabi, take Gilgamesh to the washing place that he may cleanse himself. Let him wash his long hair until it is as clean as snow. Let him remove his animal skins, and let the deep sea carry them away, so that the beauty of his appearance may be seen. Let him replace the band around his head with a new one, and let him put on a new cloak to cover his nakedness. Then accompany him on his journey back to strong-walled Uruk. Urshanabi took care of Gilgamesh as the Faraway had directed. When Gilgamesh was clean and newly clothed, the two of them climbed into Urshanabi's boat and prepared to sail away. Utanapishtim's wife then said, "Gilgamesh made a long, difficult, and dangerous journey to meet with you. In appreciation of his effort, what gift will you give him to take back with him to his city?" Utanapishtim asked Urshanabi to bring the boat close to the shore. Then he said, "Gilgamesh, because you have made a long, difficult, and dangerous journey in order to meet with me, I will send you back to strong-walled Uruk with a secret thing created by the heavenly gods. The plant that you see growing deep in the water there is like the rose. Its thorns will prick your hands when you try to pick it. However, if you can gather that plant, you will hold in your hands the gift of everlasting youth. This plant cannot make you live forever, but it will keep you young and strong all the days of your life." Gilgamesh replied, "I can gather the plant if you will give me 2 heavy stones." He tied 1 stone to each of his feet and placed his dagger between his teeth. Using a pole to push the boat out into the deep water near the plant, he jumped overboard. The stones pulled his body down into the deep water where he could reach the plant. He picked it successfully, even though it pricked his hands. Then he cut the heavy stones from his feet and let the water carry him up to the surface of the sea. Gilgamesh climbed into the boat once again, stowed the plant safely, and set off with Urshanabi. They successfully crossed the waters of death. In 3 more days, they covered the distance that would have taken another craft a month and a half. In time, they saw the cottage of Siduri and knew that the first part of their journey was behind them. Being tired and hungry, they steered the boat toward an inviting shore and beached it. To protect his plant, Gilgamesh removed it from the boat and carried it with him. He wandered over the land, enjoying the freedom of moving about on firm ground and stretching his legs. He followed a freshwater stream inland until it formed a pool. There he put the plant upon the ground along with his clothes and went for a refreshing swim. A serpent in the water smelled the appealing fragrance of the plant. It glided out of the water, slithered up the bank, took hold of the plant with its mouth, and carried it back into the water. As it returned to the water, it shed its skin, emerging younger and fresher looking. By the time Gilgamesh noticed what had happened, it was too late to save the plant. He sat down and wept. Then he took the hand of Urshanabi and said, "For whom have my hands labored? For whom does the blood of my heart work? I have obtained nothing for myself. I have only helped the serpent. Now the tide will carry the plant back into the depths of the sea." After composing himself, Gilgamesh continued, "Since it is impossible to retrieve the plant, I must become resigned to my loss. We will leave the boat on the shore as we had planned and continue our journey overland toward strong-walled Uruk." When they had walked 60 miles, they stopped to eat. After another 90 miles, they prepared to spend the night. After many days and nights, they saw the strong walls of Uruk in the distance. As they walked toward the city, Gilgamesh explained to Urshanabi, "Uruk is composed of 4 sections: the city, the orchards, borderland, and the precinct of the temple of Anu and Ishtar." As they entered the gates, Gilgamesh said, "Urshanabi, I want you to notice the strong walls of our city of Uruk. I built these walls on a foundation created in ancient times by the 7 wise men, who brought great knowledge to our land. The top of our outer wall shines with the brightness of copper, but it is made of burnt brick. Now study the inner walls of our city. Examine the fine brickwork. These walls, too, surpass all others. No human being, not even a king, will ever be able to construct more impressive walls than I have built around our city of Uruk. Now approach the majestic temple of Anu and Ishtar. No mortal, not even a king, will ever be able to build a structure as beautiful as the one I have created. Climb up and walk upon the walls of Uruk. Examine the fine brickwork. Admire the majestic temple of Anu and Ishtar. Gaze upon one man's supreme achievement." Gilgamesh inscribed these travels and these thoughts upon stone tablets, and placed these tablets on the strong walls of Uruk, so that his people could gain wisdom and remember him. That concludes Gilgamesh.